The top 10 things people get wrong about AWS billing. The very, very first thing I think a lot of people get wrong when they sign up for AWS is thinking that they're signing up for an AWS free account. There is no such thing as a free AWS account. When you sign up, you have to give them your credit card. If you use a paid service, you'll get a bill. So it's really, really important to understand that there is no free account on AWS. There is no way that you'll never get a bill unless you follow kind of these instructions about the free tier, but there's only one type of account. So I think the second thing is, if that is a concern for you, you should check out AWS Educate. It is always completely free. You can't get yourself in a situation using these tools where you get a bill, but they're structured courses. So you can't just use everything. There are, guides on getting started with storage, getting started with compute, getting started with networking. It's going to teach you a lot about AWS. It's designed for beginners, and you can register it for free, and you can use it for free, and you're never going to get a bill if you're using an AWS Educate account. So number one, free tier is not an account. Number two, not using AWS Educate. Number three, this is the third most common mistake, not using a billing alarm. So the very first thing you should do when you create an AWS account is create a billing alarm for a budget. So what you can do, you got to turn this on, and you have to be in your root account credentials. So you should never use the root account for anything other than billing. But for this case, you're going to sign into your root account, and you're going to go to the billing preferences and alert preferences, and then turn on CloudWatch billing alerts. So you can get alarms for your estimated billing. One downside is that you can't get warnings for about 24 hours. They come in. So if you're really ramping up a bill fast, that can get super expensive. Sorry, I just had to ban somebody in chat. The third biggest mistake is not creating a billing alarm. You got to go in here, you got to create a billing alarm, and what you want to do is make sure you set a limit that you're comfortable hitting. What I like to do is set a value for like $1, and then another one for what I'm comfortable with. And I'll show you what mine look like. So here's my billing and cost management page. You can see I'm spending a couple bucks a month. These are mostly in Route 53 charges for domains, but let's look at our billing alerts. So I have an AWS budget for any given month. I have this set up, and it just says if I have more than $50 in spent, it's too much AWS. So I have like a forecasted amount, and I have the current amount. It's a couple bucks. It's fine. From here, I go to the alerts page, and I just set up alerts. So I can edit them and show you, but you can see the three of them. If my actual cost grows more than 85%, this will trigger, and I'll get an email, and it'll tell me, hey, you're getting in trouble here. The second thing is the forecasted cost is greater than 100%, and then the actual cost is greater than 100%. These are both important to turn on because you want to know if it looks like you're about to go over your budget for the month. Like if you in the first couple of days you start spending more and more, it can generate this email even if you haven't hit that cost limit. So you'll know if you're like about to hit it or you're going to hit it. And then finally, of course, if the actual cost goes over my budget. And again, my budget is $50 a month. You should set this to whatever you're comfortable with. I recommend for brand new people, just set it to $1, right? That way you're going to know. The next thing you should be on the lookout for is these emails, AWS free tier limit alert. If it helps, you can, search for that in Gmail or in your email provider. I don't know if people use something other than Gmail anymore. But make sure that you allow this email and this provider from Cost Alerts at AmazonAWS.com. You will get this when you start to hit that limit. So you see my 85% usage for my free tier eligible services. This is coming through now. I use some custom metrics. So after that, I'm going to get a bill. When you start to exceed the free tier, you want to make sure you know it. So definitely get an alert for that. Turn these on, and I think these come by default. Yeah, once you create an AWS budget, these will come by default. So we've talked about the free tier is not an AWS account. It is a factor of every AWS account, and if you exceed it, you're going to get a bill. If you're uncomfortable with that, using AWS Educate, turning on these billing alerts, looking for these billing alert emails. Now we should talk about the actual rules. AWS has a pretty generous free tier. It's got a bunch of features. They have tons and tons of services. They all are free for various things. They offer trials, 1 year free, and always free services. The free year gets you kind of a little of everything. You get to run a database in RDS. You get to run EC2 instance. You get to use some S3, and then some more different things too, like SageMaker and so on. Use this website. Go to the free tier and look for the things you're considering before you create a new application, before you spin up a new service, or if you're looking at a new CDK template or CloudFormation template and you want to test something out, look at what things it provisions and look at the limits that they come with. because you are going to be stuck to these limits. And if you go over, you're going to get a bill. If you're looking for always free services, click the always free button. This is why you're going to stick around these serverless services like Lambda and Dynamo and SNS, and you get to use these for free forever. You get 1 million requests per month for free, but read the fine print here because these are limited to 400,000 gigabyte seconds or 3.2 million seconds of compute time per month. So there's limits here, and if you go over, you're going to start to get a bill. The same with Dynamo, and the same thing when we were talking about the 12 months free. Make sure you read the fine print because these are limited to specific instances like a T2 micro or a T3 micro, and they depend on the region. So not all regions have T3s. Those are the Nitro ones. You want these, but I don't think they have them in US East 1. But you can't just spin up like a, I don't know, R4XL and then use it for a couple of hours and expect that to be free. You're going to get a bill for that right away. So read the rules for the free tier. It's really important that you do this. And if you're considering like a new template or you're reading a blog post and it's telling you to go and like create this thing, create that thing, look it up in the free tier first and make sure that you know what you're getting into. Let's create an instance. Now, I think the next most common mistake is not realizing that both instances and also other like resources like CloudFormation stacks or blogs that you read on the internet are going to create multiple paid services. So when you're here and you're creating an instance, you're thinking, oh, this is great. I'm just going to turn on this instance. It's free tier, no problem. Let's just get going. But I think what a bunch of people kind of forget is that this storage is billed separately. So if we launch this instance and then later on we delete it, we have to remember to delete the storage as well. And I think this really jumps on people when they are doing stuff in the console. And I think that's probably my biggest feedback is you're using the AWS console, you're clicking around and creating some stuff. Maybe you get something working, you're trying it out, you're having fun, you're playing with it. And then you think you deleted it and you're done. You did your thing. And then at the end of the month, you get this bill for, $100 or something. And the reason is that your instance that you deployed came with attached storage, or you deployed a, you didn't delete the elastic IP that comes with this. So you get charged for like an IPv4 address. All those different components of your bill are separated. So you need to make sure that I think the easiest way to do this is just use CloudFormation. Don't use the AWS console here. That follows a bunch of best practices anyway. But when you're doing this, you got to remember to go off and look at these other components of the EC2 dashboard or the other components that you spun up and delete the storage and free the EIP address and delete the instance itself. And that way you're not going to get a bill because you kind of went through one flow to create everything, but it's a separate flow to delete other things. You have this instance and you hit stop and you think, okay, we're done. It does warn you right here. You're going to be billed for associated resources. This includes elastic IP addresses and EBS volumes. So they tell you this. So you're going to stop this instance. Now we're not going to get billed for it anymore. And I'm actually just going to delete it because I don't need it anymore. But now what I have to do is actually go to the EBS volume and delete it. On an EBS, okay, this is good to know. On an EBS-backed instance, the default action for the root volume is to be deleted when the instance is terminated. So storage is actually going to be lost. So now you can actually terminate it and it'll delete your storage. But make sure, right? Go over here. You have this volume. This is going to cost you money. So refresh it. Make sure it's gone. I said refresh it. Make sure it's gone. Is it not gone? Boom. Successful termination. Honestly, my best advice is just get started with the serverless stuff. You're going to be happy there too. Use Lambda, use Dynamo, use S3. There's a ton of stuff you can build there. There's years of learning that you can do there, building on top of this kind of serverless primitive, and you're never going to get a bill. And if you want to jump onto a new project, you just create a new project, and you don't get a bill for every project because they're not getting used. And yeah, of course, once you get users, it's a different thing, but these billing alerts are going to help you there. And there's more stuff we can do. You can talk about provision concurrency, so you can run in provision mode and pay a little bit less for your compute. There's a ton of things you can do to limit your bill, but you do have to read the docs. I'm sorry. Did this shut down? Okay. Great. So yeah, you can see that we deleted that instance, and now the volume itself was actually deleted because we fully terminated it. So don't just stop the instance, also go out and delete it. And then you should definitely go out and look at your elastic IPs and make sure you don't have any of these, because these now you get a charge like a $4 a month charge for. Same with load balancers. If you're deploying a template like that you found on the internet, you're probably going to end up with a load balancer. Those cost you about $20 a month or $14 a month to run, and they're billed hourly. So make sure you turn these off and delete them. The next really common mistake that I see people make is using and deploying these like really really sweet high availability templates that you find on the internet. This is an example. I'm not picking on this one specifically. I love the AWS CDK examples repo. You should use it. But here's like just an example. You have a load balanced ECS cluster deployed across multiple availability zones. This is great. This is the type of thing you want to probably learn because it's something that you're going to use in a production environment at a company. However, it's going to be expensive to run, and when you're running these sweet highly available services, or you're doing cross-zonal replication or even cross-regional replication, you're going to get a bill for that. AWS charges on network bandwidth, and they charge a lot. So if you're replicating data across availability zones or even across regions, that's expensive, and that racks up a quick charge. So deploy this, test it, but then delete it right away once you're done testing it, because you're gonna get a bill for this. A lot of these patterns are really, really good to learn, but they're not free. All of these are going to cost money. I don't think any of these are free tier projects. They're all going to be pretty expensive relative to like a free tier. You know what I mean? They're going to be like tens or 20s or hundreds of dollars a month, but they're worth trying out. They're worth reading about, and they're certainly worth like reading how they set them up, right? You can learn the networking, you can learn the availability, and you can learn kind of some best practices from this, but you don't necessarily have to deploy everything. And if you stick around with this like Lambda DynamoDB stuff, this is going to be free. This is going to be totally free. Now, we've transitioned away from the mistakes that I think new people make when they're trying out AWS on their own. I want to talk a little bit about startup mistakes, or like new account kind of corporate new company mistakes that a lot of people make. The very first one is not splitting up your organization using AWS organizations. You should absolutely do this. Every time you're going to launch a new service, if it doesn't have specific networking needs for the rest of your infrastructure, if you're going to spin up something on its own, you should create a new AWS account for this. If you're going to create, a data warehouse kind of group, or like, data science kind of group, or you want to spin up an account for, prod versus staging versus dev versus, Gary and accounting, they should all be separate AWS accounts. This is good for security practices, but it's also good for billing, because each of these can have tags. So every account that you create, you should tag it, and you can give multiple tags here. But this will help you roll up when you look at billing metrics. It'll tell you not only which account it came from, but also any of these tags. Not setting tags on your infrastructure that you create is a big mistake that people make. So definitely add tags to infrastructure and add tags to AWS accounts. The next most common mistake I see a lot of organizations make is not letting developers get access to the billing and cost management part of AWS. They usually restrict this, and it's limited to like the CTO and the CFO or whatever. This is difficult because every technology decision that you're making is a financial decision about how much that's going to cost for an application you're designing. So cost decisions are also engineering decisions, and your engineer should be able to see this information and see what their service is going to cost them for a given month or a given year or whatever. The more you allow developers access to this, the more they're going to see things like we've talked about already, orphaned resources they don't necessarily need, or the actual cost of the service is growing in a way they didn't expect. They're going to be able to find and track down these problems with the Cost Explorer, and they're going to be able to save you some money in the long run. So I'm not sure where culturally this came from, but there was this long history where developers weren't given access to any of the cost information for what they were doing, and I think that's a mistake. You definitely want your developers to be able to see what they're spending when their services are composed together inside of AWS, because if you're not doing that, then you're going to have these runaway bills, and you're going to have to eventually, someone's going to track it down and come to your desk and say, what is this, this charge for ECR? What's this charge for Glacier? Why do we enter into this crazy long, savings plan contract if we're not using any of these services, or they're not permanent part of our bill? As your company grows, data transfer in AWS is going to become a significant component of your bill. So it's important to sort of understand that now as you're learning this stuff, because it can get out of control really quickly. I recommend checking out Corey Quinn's blogs on the duckbillgroup.com. I'll add a link in the description here. It is a really good infographic that tells you exactly where you're getting charged per terabyte or per gigabyte between different points, including inside of regions, inside of different availability zones, things like private link if you're merging VPCs or like VPC endpoints, and so on and so forth. There is a lot here. This is difficult to grasp, but these costs do add up. So it's important to understand when you have any service, if you're deploying a highly available service, you're going to deploy it across AZs. replicating that data across AZs is not free. Like if you're running Kafka, you're running like a 3-node Kafka cluster in 3 AZs in US East 1, you're going to get a bill for that traffic between all of those AZs. So that's something to really consider. A lot of managed services don't bill for transit. So if you're using something like EKS, you can kind of get away from that here, or you're just storing data in S3, for example, you can, avoid those cross-region fee or cross-AZ fees that way. And then he always talks about this, but managed NAT gateway is one of the most common large expenses inside of your AWS account. You have a NAT gateway in your VPC. You need NAT so that your instances can access the outside internet, and then that is billed at a hourly rate, and then you get $45 a terabyte for any kind of transfer. So that can really add up. Corey's also got a great blog about turning stuff off, but we already covered a little bit about this, but I want to talk about the things that I think come up a lot, and that is deleting old data that you don't realize you have. So if you're doing, backups every 12 hours of every instance's EBS route, for example, that's going to get really expensive, especially if you add them up over the course of years or more. Think about how long your backups need to last. I once saved our company like $5,000 a month because we had point-in-time restore on DynamoDB tables that were storing like high-volume data in our dev account. So once I realized that and I got access to the billing account, I thought, wait a second, our dev account has this crazy charge and it's almost all coming from Dynamo. And then I looked at it, and yeah, it's all from these backups from data that we can just burn. So enable your developers to see that stuff, and then make sure they're looking at the storage charges that kind of can rack up, because by default, they tend to last in perpetuity. CloudWatch is similar, although I think the largest charge in CloudWatch is the 50 cents a gigabyte just to ingest. But even then, if you have unlimited retention, you're going to get a bill for that at some point. Amazon ECR is another common one I see. People push Docker containers every couple minutes when they're working on stuff, and then they don't ever delete any of their containers images. So set life cycles on those things, and then you can delete old ones. Once you get in the habit of that, it's really easy to kind of extend that pattern for life cycles everywhere else, but it's important. S3 is another big one to look at. S3 storage lens will help you understand what's in your bucket when it's being used, and if you can delete it, then you can also kind of save a bunch of money deleting stuff out of S3 that you're not using anymore. Now and only now, once you've done all these things, can you really consider signing a long-term contract for something like either reserved instances or saving plans? I'm not an expert here. Corey Quinn's the real expert here. My understanding is that saving plans tend to be more flexible because it's commit spend for a given year that you can kind of shift around between things. Yeah, this is typically for compute. So once you get this far, it's probably worthwhile to explore a savings plan, especially for like the steady state compute that you're spending. If you're going to have 30 EC2 instances every single month in this region, that's something worthwhile. I think the benefit of the compute savings plan is you can move it around regardless of the region and the AZ. But you do get, compared to a reserved instance where you have to pick the specific AZ and the specific instance type. So I think savings plans tend to do a little bit better. But I think only once you've done these other 12 things that I've asked you to do, even though it was, we were going with 10, but we got a bonus 12. Now you can really consider entering into a savings plan agreement. And they offer a pretty substantial discount here. But that will take you pretty far. So let me know if I missed anything in the comments, and come yell at me on Twitter if there's something I forgot. Either way, now I think you're a lot more enabled to go out and create an AWS account with a confidence that you're not going to get a surprise bill. And then as you grow, your company, or as you grow your use of AWS, you'll feel confident using these tools available to manage your bill. That's all I got for you today. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.